Alright, Swifters, it's time to learn to save data to the app's file directory using Codable. We're going to learn about Codable. We're going to learn about the differences between Foundation and UIKit and recognize common errors and how to deal with them. We're going to learn how to use the JSONEncoder and decoder. We're going to use the file manager to find the app's document directory, save data to the document directory, and load data from the document directory. Are you ready for it, Swifter? Let's giddy up. Now, when you save data in an application on your Mac, you're usually using some kind of special format. A docx format for Word, for example, or XLSX for Excel. Web pages are typically saved in an HTML format. Well, our app doesn't have a standard file format, but iOS does know a few formats, including a popular format called JSON, which we're going to use, another one called property lists orplists. Now, taking our data and turning it into JSON is called encoding, and going from JSON to our format is called decoding. And before we can encode or decode, we need to make sure that we can go from our format to JSON and back. And we do this by conforming our struct to the Codable protocol. Now, to do this, all we need to do is add Codable to our struct. That's it. So let's do that now. Get into the to-do list app, go to the to-do item struct that we created, and right after the struct definition, type Codable. That's it. We're done. By doing this, we've just determined that this struct is ready to be coded and decoded. If there are any problems, Xcode will complain. I'll do a quick clean, Shift-Command-K, no problems at all. Now, some data types can't be coded. Now, just to show you what could go wrong, I'll try to add a UI image to this struct. Now, UI image isn't codable, but I'm going to show you another problem that we're going to have along the way. And so just a quick detour, I'm going to delete Codable first so I can show this to you. If I go down here and I declare a new property called image, which is going to be type of UI image, notice that UI image doesn't show up in code completion. That suggests code completion doesn't know about UI image. And in fact, I can try to type it in right in here, and it doesn't seem to know it at all. And after Xcode thinks for a little while, I get use of undeclared type UI image. The problem that we have here is when you create a basic class or struct in Swift using a Swift file, we don't import UIKit. I don't know if you've ever noticed this before, but at the beginning of our view controller, we import UIKit. This gives us access to all of Apple's classes, data structures, methods, properties associated with its user interface libraries. Now, the reason why Xcode doesn't import UIKit by default when you create your own struct or class is because Xcode assumes most of the time when you want to create your own generic class, you're not necessarily creating something associated with the user interface. Xcode tries not to give you stuff that it thinks you're not going to need because that would lead to bloated and less efficient code. But because the UI image type, it starts with UI, is part of the UIKit library, we're going to get an error unless we import UIKit. We import UIKit, the error goes away. Now, that's not what's going to break this. The problem occurs if I try to go up here and conform to Codable again. So if I conform to Codable, do a Shift-Command-K for cleaning, I get an error. To-do item does not conform to the protocol decodable. The reason for that is UI image cannot be turned into the JSON format. JSON can't take stuff and immediately turn it into UI image. Now, if I delete the image property, do Shift-Command-K, the error goes away. Now, the way to get around this is by converting the UI image to data before saving it and then converting the data back to a UI image when you load it from your iOS device. We don't have to worry about any of that now, though. Now, next up, we're going to create a save data function in our app. Now, every app actually has the ability to save data to a document directory. It's a little space on the iPhone dedicated to that app. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to find the document directory, then we're going to append the name of our file and the file type, which is going to be JSON, to that location. So now we have an address to save our document data at. Then we're going to encode our data, which is essentially taking it from our own array of structs, which is now codable, and turning it into JSON format. Then we'll write the encoded data to the document location we created above. Now, once we've created this save data function, we can save our data whenever it's changed. So, for example, when we unwind, we've either edited or we've added a record, when we move our records, or when we delete a record. Whenever we do those things, we're going to call save data. Let's do it. Now, we don't need to have UIKit, but it's not going to hurt our code. But just to go back to Foundation, we'll go ahead and do that. At this stage, our app is not that complex, so we're not going to notice any special efficiency. Now, let's go into to-do list viewcontroller.swift. This is where we're going to go ahead and we're going to write our save data routine. So why don't we go down here and write that function just before prepare for segue. So I'll say func save data. I don't need to pass in any values. The first thing I need to do is I need to get my app's directory where I can save data. Now, in order to get to the directory, we're going to go through something called the app's file manager. And we could get the location in a couple of different formats. One is called paths, the other is called URLs. I know it sounds weird because when you think about URL, you normally think about going to a web address, but this will actually allow us to go to a saving location that's on our physical iOS device. And we'll use URLs instead of paths. They're a little bit easier to work with, and you'll see the URL object in future apps that you'll develop where you actually need to get data from the web. So I'm going to create a constant to hold that directory location. I'll say let directory URL equals, and then capital file manager. We see the description and code completion, a convenient interface to the contents of the file system and the primary means for interacting with it. So this just allows us to set up a variable we can use that'll give us access to all the stuff that we want to access on our app's file system. We'll use this. Then after file manager, we're going to say .default .urls. Notice that's URLs with an S at the end. It's one of those weird plural functions. Open parenthesis, you want to select the option that has for and in. For for, we're going to put in the value .document directory. That'll show up in code completion. For in, we're going to say .user domain mask. Look at code completion's description. It says the place to install the user's personal items. In our app, that means the place where we want to save the user's data. Then after the parenthesis, we're going to say .first exclamation point. Now remember, this method is called .urls, plural, so it actually returns an array. By saying .first, we say get that first element in the array. That's the one we want. This line of code is not at all user-friendly, especially for the new programmer. The good news is you're going to use this exact same line over and over again whenever you need to get your app's file directory. So if you got this working once, you can just copy and paste it and reuse it in all your other apps. On this next line, we're going to take the directory URL we just created and essentially append to that a file name and the file extension. And we'll call that directory and file name document URL. So we'll say let document URL equals, we'll say directory URL, which we just created, and then .appending path component. Inside the parentheses, we'll put a string, which is essentially the file name. So I'll just say to-dos, all in lowercase. I could call it whatever I want, but to-dos is a pretty good name. Then .appending path extension, and in that I'll put in parentheses, in quotes, the string JSON, JSON, since we're working with JSON files. If you want to reuse these two lines of code in another app, the only thing you need to change is to-dos. You'll probably have a different file name in a different app. That's it. So now we need to create a JSON encoder to go from our array of codable structs into JSON. So we'll just say let lowercase JSON encoder equals, and then capital JSON, capital E encoder. Notice what the code completion says. It's an object that encodes instances of a data type as JSON objects. That's exactly what we want. Open and close parenthesis. That'll just create one of these things from the JSON encoder class. Then we want to get data, so we'll put that in a value named data. We'll say let data equals, and then we're going to use something that throws. So we have to say try question mark JSON encoder that we just created, dot, and as you start to type in encode, look at what shows up here. So this is the method, and you see how it says throws afterward? That's why we've got to use this try bit. It says it encodes the instance of the indicated type. What's our type? Well, the thing we want to encode is to-do items. That's our array. It's an array of type struct to-do item, which is codable, so we can do this. Now, what's up with a try question mark? If we use try question mark, essentially if we throw an error, we're just going to get nil back. We're not going to put that error in anything. We could put some more error handling in here if we wanted to, but I think this is going to be fine for our purposes. And that's really because to-do item conforms to codable, so we already know it can be encoded and turned into JSON. Now we'll be a little bit more cautious in this next bit. So we'll do a do, open and close curlies, and we're going to say try data question mark right, and an open parentheses. We want this one that says to and options. Notice code completion says it writes the contents of the data buffer to a location. It also throws, and that's why we're using the do try catch. For the to parameter, we'll put in document URL. For options, we'll say .no file protection, which sounds scary, but this will just allow the file to overwrite any existing file, which is what we want to do, because if we've just made changes to our data, we want to overwrite the old data with the new data. Then after the do close curlies, we do catch, open and close curlies. And remember, the catch executes if we throw an error, so we'll just put in a print statement, angry emoji, error, colon, could not save data, string interp, error.localize description. And I'm just going to copy the name save data, and I'm going to paste it in every place where our data changes. So an unwind from detail after the if-else condition executes, regardless of what happens there, if I update an existing record or if I add a new record, if I'm unwinding, I'm going to want to save data. Then I'll also add it in commit editing style inside the if statement. If I delete a record, I want to make sure I save the data. And also in move row at, after I've rearranged the data, I want to make sure that I save it in the new rearranged order. So now let's build and run, and every update that we do here is going to save that data to our iOS device. Remember, if you're running a simulator, each different device that you simulate is going to have its own version of the app and its own version of the data. And here we've got no data, but I'll press plus to add some, learn Swift, it's time. We'll do that today at 5:30 and save. Add another, build apps, I have a great idea. We'll do that tomorrow. Add another, change the world, be the change. And why don't we do that on Tuesday? And one more, make dinner for the fam, babies are hungry. And we'll do that right now, but my babies aren't babies anymore. And there we go. We got 4 to-do items in here. We've just saved them. I'm going to quit out of the simulator now, and let's code up our load data function. So our load data function is going to start out exactly like our save data function. We're going to get the app's document directory, and we're going to set up a document location. We're going to keep the name the same because we're loading and saving at the same location with the same file name. Then we're going to get the coded data or read the coded data that was saved at the document location. We're going to decode that data from any encoded format, in our case it's JSON, into our array of structs. And again, we can do that because our structs are codable. And then we'll reload our table view. Where do we need to call load data? Right in view did load. As soon as we run the app, we want to load up our data and show what the user had the last time they quit. So I'll add func load data just above save data, no parameters passed in, open and close curlies. Let's highlight the first 2 lines from save data, let directory URL and let document URL, copy them, paste them right into load data. Then I need to read in the data at this document URL, and I'm going to do that inside of a guard let statement. And I'm going to say data equals, and I'll do try with a question mark. Remember, that means if there's an error, I'll just get a nil. And because it's a guard let, if I get a nil, I'm just going to go ahead and return. If I couldn't read the data, I'm not going to crash the app. I'm just not going to load my arrays up with data as I didn't get any data. Then I'll say capital data. That means I want to create a new object of type data. So capital data is a data type, just like string or double or, in our case, to-do item. And we'll say open brackets because we want to create data. And we're going to scroll down here and select contents of URL. And notice this one has throws. That's why we need the try. Inside the URL we're going to pass in is going to be document URL. As part of guard let, we always have an else at the end, and we're just going to do open and close curly return. You can put it all on one line, that's totally fine. Again, what happens if data throws an error here? We get a nil, we just don't load any data. And this is actually what would happen the first time a user installs this app on a new device. Now, in our case, the next time we run, we're going to load in data because we coded our app where we saved data before we loaded it in. But the first time a user runs this app, there's no file on disk. So this guard let is going to stop the load data function because there's nothing to load, but the user can still go and use the app and add their new data without any problem. Next line, we're going to create a JSONDecoder just like we created an encoder in save data. So we'll say let lowercase JSONDecoder equals uppercase JSONDecoder, open and close parentheses. Then when I decode data, that's going to potentially throw an error. So what I'll do is I'll put in do, open and close curlies, Xcode readjusts itself, and we'll say to do items, so that's the array I want to fill up, equals try, that's why I'm inside of a do catch, JSONDecoder that we just created. Make sure you choose this lowercase one, which is the object, not the uppercase one, which is the blueprint or the class. Dot decode, open parentheses. There's only one option. Code completion describes it as decodes an instance of the indicated type. That's what we want to do. Now the type syntax is a little weird here, but we're going to say capital array, then less than sign, to do item, and that's upper camel case. It's the type name in here. Greater than symbol, dot self, then comma, from, colon, data. And that's lowercase data that we created above. Close parentheses. That's a weird line, but it just says, hey, create an array of type to-do item from the data. If this works, right underneath that, we put tableview.reload data, open and close parens. Otherwise, in the catch statement, we'll just copy the print statement that we had for the error in save data, paste it above, just change the one word so it says error could not load data. Then where do we put this call to load data? Right at the end of view did load. That's when we want to get the data right after the view loaded. We'll put that right underneath the table view delegate and data source. Build and run and oh, we've got all of our data in here. Excellent. Let's click on edit. Can we put make dinner for the fam up top because I need to feed them? Looking good. What about if I want to do something with change the world? We'll move that up third from the top. Click to get out of edit mode. Click on change the world. Let's change this to be the change. We'll click on save. Everything is saving. This is looking great. Let's add a record in here. Why don't we say, have breakfast? We'll do it tomorrow at 6:13 a.m. Let's delete dinner with the fam. We'll assume we just did that. What happens if I quit out of the app? I build and run again. Will we have all of our data saved in the order that we'd saved it in, deleting items, editing items? And oh, we do. Looking spectacular. You can click on these and double check to make sure everything is in there, but it is. Nice work, Swifter. I want to show you one more thing. Sometimes you want to clear all the data out of the app. It'd be especially important if you made a change to your data structures in your code and the data that you saved wasn't going to be compatible with this new data structure. And the best way to do that is just to delete the app from the simulator. You do that the way you would just do that on a regular iPhone. So I'm going to go up under Hardware. I'm going to select Home. You could also just swipe up to get to the home screen. Then if you long press the icons, it'll start to jiggle as if it's in fear of being deleted. You can select Delete App. You'll get a confirmation alert. Select Delete. I'm going to quit out of the simulator. I'm going to rerun my app. It will reinstall the app, and that'll include a brand new directory that doesn't have any data in it. There we have it. No data. App functions. Looking good. Swifter, you know what's coming in challenge. Modify the EU challenge project from our earlier videos. Use the techniques that you learned to create a function named SaveData that will save all of the data right into the app. You should save your data to your device using the name nations. Add SaveData to any part of the app where the data should be saved. Remove the code and arrays that read data into the nations array. Create a function named loadData that will load data from the file named nations and add it to the array nations, and call the loadData function and show that all of the data that was once hard-coded into the app is now read from a file on the device, and that you can edit all of the data. Are you up for it, Swifter? I bet you are. Pause. And resume. Let's see how you did. All right, Swifters, here we are in the EU project. We're going to go first into nations, and we want to make sure that this is Codable compliant. So we're going to adopt the Codable protocol. There we are, Codable. Boom, it's done. We're all set. Now we can go over to viewcontroller.swift. We're going to add a loadData and a SaveData function, and this is the scoop. We've already created these. These functions are incredibly reusable. Again, I always advise that you go ahead and retype in all the code and think about the lines to make sure that you know what you're doing. But to show you how reusable things are, I am going to take a shortcut. I'm going to switch back to my to-do list app. I'm going to grab both my SaveData and my loadData function from the to-do list project, copy them, return to the EU project, paste them back into viewcontroller.swift just after view did load. If we take a look at the function itself, we can see one area where we're getting errors in here because there is no to-do items array in this project. The array that we use is called nations. We're also going to change the name of the file from to-dos. We could actually leave that, but that wouldn't be very good because we're not really saving to-do lists in here. Although there's no harm in calling it to-dos, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I'm going to change the file name to nations. Down here, we're not going to refer to to-do item. We're going to refer to nation, an array of nation. That's capital N nation because we're referring to the type. We go down here into save data. We see we've got to do something similar in here. We're going to encode nations. And now this is lowercase because we're talking about the array of data and not the type. We're going to make sure when we create our document URL that that also comes from nations. It's absolutely critical that you have consistent spelling and capitalization here. Otherwise, you're saving and loading from two different things. In both locations, I have lowercase nations. Everything else is looking good, though. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're actually not going to load our data in yet, because what we want to do is we want to read in the data from all of our dummy data up here. Then once we've saved that data, then we're going to call our load data in viewDidLoad, but we're not going to call that the first time we run it because we want to grab all of this data that we're going to read in the next time we run. But I want to make sure that I use save data every place where I should. So I'm going to copy save data, just the name of the function right here. I'm going to paste that into unwind. In either case, I want to make sure that I save data. I also want to go down here to if I'm in commit editing style. If I've deleted a row, I want to make sure that I save data. And if I've moved my rows around, I want to save the new row order. So I'm going to build and run. Let's see how things look. We shouldn't notice any changes here because we're reading in all the data that we'd had before. But I say, okay, I'm going to move stuff. So maybe I'll move Belgium up on top of Austria, and then I'll move it back down to Belgium. I'll just make sure that something is saved in here. So do done, then move Belgium down to Austria. Do done again. That should have just called save data inside of move row at. I'm going to quit out of the simulator. It should have saved the data. So now I'm going to highlight this data here just in case I run into a problem. I don't want to delete all of my arrays yet, but I am going to comment them out so that they don't exist anymore. I'm also going to scroll down here. I no longer need to set up the nations array this way. I can simply say in its place, load data right here in viewDidLoad. Now let's build and run and see if we're able to read the data in off of our iOS device. I think we're going to be able to. And there we have it! Fantastic! We've got the UK here. Let's delete the UK. Oh, we are gone. Sorry about that, UK, but you are no longer part of the EU. Let's see if we want to change the orders here. Maybe we'll move Denmark to the very top. Maybe we'll move Estonia ahead of Denmark. I've been to both of those countries. They are lovely. I'll click on done. Let's quit out of here and run again. This time we have, again, no data in here. Did it save the changes? Will we see Estonia up top, then Denmark, and no UK? And indeed, that's what we see. Fantastic, Swifter. I hope you are feeling that you have colossal saving skills now. You've got credibility in Codable, and you are gaining superpowers. Keep at it, my friends.